We have all kinds of conversations with individuals about getting their own affairs in order and what are the options that they have to make a difference. I enjoy those conversations. I'm blessed by the conversations of people that many times they know exactly what they want to do. And many times maybe they may even be flexible in what they do, but they know what they don't want to do.
Hello, this is Pastor Terry Goodman, and I want to welcome you to the Wesleyan Connection. This podcast is primarily for the clergy and laity of the Holston Annual Conference. Join with me now as I take a look around the Connection and share some of the things happening in the churches of our annual conference. Good morning. I want to welcome you to this edition of the Wesleyan Connection podcast. I hope that you have been enjoying the podcast over the past few weeks. Annual conference is just around the corner, and I'm going to be working hopefully with Annette Spence to produce some special editions of the Call podcast. Also, I will want to be meeting with people at annual conference. So if you're going to be at annual conference and if you have a story that you want to tell about what's happening in your local church, look me up. I would be more than glad to sit down and talk with you, do an interview, and learn about how God is moving in your part of the annual conference. And I believe that there will be others that would like to hear that kind of story as well. Today, however, we are going to hear from Roger Redding. He's the executive director of the Holston Conference Foundation. I've known Roger now several years, and rather than try to explain what it is that he does and what the foundation does, I just encourage you to sit back and listen to the interview as he tries to explain those things to us. I'm here today with Roger Redding, who is, what's your official title?
Executive Director of the Holston Conference of the United Methodist Church Foundation. And that and 25 cents used to get you a cup of coffee.
How would you define, what's your elevator pitch definition of the Holston Conference Foundation?
Well, sometimes it depends on what day. We're a stewardship ministry. We're a generosity ministry. A lot of folks think that our primary mission is investing funds. They think of us as a bank or a brokerage type firm. And of course, investments, caring for investments is a very important part of what we do. Serving ministries, my favorite part is actually serving individuals, and that's in special gifts, in estate planning, in what we call the term planned gifts. I rarely find any gifts that aren't planned.
How does that work? Give me an example of how something like that would work.
Well, sure. I get phone calls sometimes out of the blue and sometimes in response to materials that we've left at a church or a program, a brochure, people even stumbling across our website from time to time. But perhaps they have a special love for their church or a particular ministry in their church, or maybe they love Holston Home for Kids, or they thought, what does it take to send a preacher to seminary, and they're interested in creating a scholarship, higher education, or for seminary. But individuals get interested in their future, their plans, something they'd like to leave to say, I was here, to thank God for the clean air and water that we breathe. The gift that we enjoy every day that we take for granted is, one, we get to be here in Holston Conference. What a beautiful area of the country. But people also, sometimes they've been on a journey. It's not always easy, but they maybe have been touched and they want to make life a little bit better for someone else. That could be somebody in Holston. It could be a student. It could be a ministry in need. It could be their church to help maintain that organ from England that somebody told them not to get 50 years ago, or to build an elevator, or let's face it, water heaters aren't very exciting. But when they go out, we have issues. And usually it's something more than a water heater. It's like an air conditioning system or heating system.
That cost a few $1,000s. I've been there.
Cost a few thousand, and it's like all of a sudden, it's like, oh, who would have thought the roof would have ever worn out? It's been there perfectly fine for the last 40 years, and it leaks, and we've got to do something about it. And all of a sudden, our local church budget is out the window. So some folks are blessed maybe with a longer-term view or appreciation that they think maybe, what if I created a fund that would help my church maintain facilities? Now, to some folks, facilities aren't very exciting. Their idea of ministry is more what a church does outside its walls. It's being in the pub. I think our churches should be outside, not just inside. But when the roof leaks or the air conditioning's out, we got some serious problems. So some people are blessed to create a fund that will help a church deal with that and, equip the trustees with some extra money. So maybe the budget isn't totally crushed this year, but we can save some money and put them aside for special projects.
And your role in this process is to maybe help them get the wordage right?
Well, we play both ends of the spectrum in the street. One is we like to be in churches talking about the vision for individuals' gifts and opportunities, the need to support the ministry of a church, but also sometimes it's quietly in maybe a living room. Maybe it's after church in a hallway. Maybe it's through email or a letter. We have all kinds of conversations with individuals about getting their own affairs in order and what are the options that they have to make a difference. I enjoy those conversations. I'm blessed by the conversations of people that many times they know exactly what they want to do. And many times maybe they may even be flexible in what they do, but they know what they don't want to do. And so we are big document writers. So in conversations with our prospective donors, we'll have conversations. Well, I like to ask people, why are you doing this? And it's not because I'm nosy. I want to know what is that Sunday school teacher back in the third grade, their mother and father, their grandparents, struggles they've been through, the blessings they've had. What are the things that cause them to be Christian, to be a Wesleyan individual, to understand that it's not about us, but we've been blessed, and they want to do something to help others. And if we write a pretty, it maybe sounds overwhelming, but they're really legalistic-looking documents that tell a story. But after the individual's gone, particularly if it's a permanent fund, an endowment, a scholarship, something that's supposed to last forever or at least a long time, what it really is a roadmap, and it tells us what we're supposed to do, what their intent was. I have a terrible example that I deal with in churches. It's very frustrating sometimes to be in a church and be pressed with a need, and there's a big fund with a lot of money in it. And sometimes churches don't have any pots with a lot of money. But if there is, and you're on the trustees and you need to pave the parking lot and there's some holes in it, you're running short this year, but there's this big music fund that's got all this money in it. And Mrs. Smith went to church here 30 years ago, and her family's not even in the area anymore, Terry. They've moved away. And and you need that money right now. We just need that money right now. And somebody gets this look in their eye, and they go, aha, the choir parks in that parking lot. And we've all been there. But we know if that was my mom or your mom, and it was supposed to be a music fund, paving the parking lot is not exactly what a music fund is, but we all agree the parking lot needs to be paved. So in this process, there are documents that can be drafted that say what's acceptable, what if something changes, are there any options to do anything else, or is it for this? And so sometimes knowing an individual's heart, we don't want to violate something. We want to be good stewards. But if there's an opportunity, perhaps a document will be a guide to let us know what we could do and we can't do.
full disclosure moment here. I've been working with Roger concerning my current church now for the last few years, because they have several endowments and investment funds set up, and we're always asking, what's the right way we're supposed to be going with this? How can we use it this way, or so forth? So they're very helpful on the back end side of things as well. They will help you to interpret and try to figure out, as he says, what that story's about and what the person intended to do with that money. So,
well, it's always easier, Terry, when the donor has it in their words.
And
then we can't argue with it. So we try our best to do that. On the other side of the street, we try to help churches establish, I'll call them buckets, and sometimes they're empty buckets. What are the funds that you would like to have? Now, I'll pick on them because it's pretty easy. If you're on the trustees, you want money to maintain your building and grounds and facilities. That's an important factor that we have. If I was at a camp, I would want money to maintain a camp and keep it physically sound and structurally sound. But sometimes we need money to work with to do programs. And so there's also a need for mission and outreach type funds. If I was on finance committee, I don't want anybody tying my hands. And so a general endowment, for example, that is whatever the priority need happens to be this year, is
need a roof this year, Roger.
Well,
need a roof.
then it could be. It could be. So those are we call those the kind of the three legs of the stool for a fund. Sometimes there's special situations. Boy, is this good or bad? Churches have cemeteries, and guess what? The grass grows and the fences get broken, and we have issues with how are we going to maintain the cemetery. Nobody's looking for a fight. But we helped an awful lot of churches in Holston Conference invest their cemetery funds. And we have some tools to invest and spend. For example, we use what's called a rolling 3-year market value average on funds like that. It helps us get out the ups and downs of the markets. Over the long haul, stocks outperform bonds that outperform money markets. But anybody that tells you they know exactly that's going to happen this year they're either lying or lucky, because nobody really has that ability. But over the long term, a diversified, low-cost mix of funds like that. For example, if you're cutting the cemetery grass, when does it start growing? Well, in March or April. Depends on where you are in the conference. And so traditionally, churches have gone out and bought a 1-year CD. It matures in the 1st of April, and they use that money to cut the grass. Well, the last few years, if you haven't noticed, there is no interest rate. It's less than 1%. It's terrible. But we've been able to have churches grow their investments and keep up with inflation and still spend 4 to 5% of the market value of a fund. It's made a tremendous difference. But it's doing things a little bit differently. So I'm meeting with a church actually tonight up around the Bulls Gap area. And they've just come into some money. They have a parsonage account that they placed here a couple of years ago, and another fund that they placed here a year or so ago. And they have been blessed with another gift. I don't know how much it is, but they've invited me to come visit their church and talk about the options, and we will. And they'll have a choice. Working with churches, sometimes it takes a lot of patience. I don't have to tell you as a pastor, but sometimes we're kind of slow moving in how we do things that we haven't done before. But I really am thrilled. About 40% of all the funds in the foundation actually belong to local churches. And that means if they hate our guts or don't like how we're doing things or getting mad or whatever, it's at the end of any month, they can take their entire account balance out, and I hope they won't go put it under a rock somewhere, but it's theirs. So we act as a custodian of the funds they place with us.
And you are not the annual conference.
No, thank you. Bless the annual conference. Bless all our DSs and our bishop and all our we are definitely connected to the conference. We were created by the conference, but we were created to be a separate entity. What that is supposed to mean is that we're a servant to the churches and entities and the individuals, but we have a little bit of freedom to move and not be under the thumb of. So we're governed by a board of about 25 individuals. All of them are members of United Methodist churches across the Holston Conference. If anybody's listening and is interested, I'm always interested in finding good quality board members. We have our board meeting next week. We have 3 new board members coming on. I'm excited to get them involved. Every one of them will have a preconceived notion of what we are. We'll be a little bit different than what they probably think that we are. But we're servants to the conference, and we are investors. Through another about 40% of the funds that we have are individually created bequests and legacies that people have left. The majority of those go directly to the entities, churches, Holston Home, camps, scholarships that they selected. And then we have some folks that have left some kind of leeway. And this is, I want to provide clean water around the world. I want your committee, your group to select a project if it's a recurring fund, or to provide a scholarship. It could be kids to Hiawassee, to Tennessee Wesleyan, to Emory and Henry. Most of ours are conference college-related scholarships. But we have some individuals that say, gee, I want any kid in the Knoxville area that's a United Methodist to get a scholarship. Very few of those type funds, but scholarships, seminary scholarships, and sometimes very unusual things. I have one gentleman that's left money for his church to pay their utility bill because he was tired of them fighting over utilities. But most are a little bit more general. Or have some kind of focus, or they're very specific. Most of the funds in the foundation, we have no voice in how they're used. So I expect this. At the end of the last calendar year, we're managing about $111 million. I mean, that's an awful lot of money. When I first came here 16, 17 years ago, we were just over $25 million. So we've seen an amazing amount of growth in churches that invest with us and ministries that invest with us, but particularly in individuals creating plans. I've been blessed by their stories, but those funds all are managed very much in the same way. A very small church that has an account with us pays the exact same fee and process that a very large church does. So we don't discriminate, and we don't really reward because you've got more. We give you some kind of a discount. By the way, you can't buy stocks and bonds and those type things without there being costs. So when we have an investment account in the foundation, there are costs involved with it. We net those costs actually out of the pooled investment interest and dividends. So a church never sees a direct charge against their account. But there is a charge out there. It's a very reasonable charge, cheaper than most brokerage houses or trust companies at all, but a very diversified, socially conscious mix of investments. And we're very pleased with our performance.
Okay. Well, Roger, I want to thank you for what you do for our annual conference. Thank you for the foundation. Look forward to hearing more from you and working with you some more in the years ahead.
Thanks a lot, Terry.
This is Pastor Goodman. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Wesleyan Connection. Be sure to check back often for more podcasts.